The ancient halls of the Galactic Council echoed with whispered conversations as representatives from dozens of species gathered for what many believed would be their final session. Ambassador Zethkri of the Valerian Empire adjusted his ceremonial robes, the silver threading catching the artificial sunlight that streamed through the massive dome overhead. Around him, beings of various forms and colors spoke in hushed tones about the approaching darkness. The burning tide had already consumed 17 star systems in the outer rim. No fleet had managed to slow their advance, let alone stop it. The enemy ships moved like liquid fire through space, their hulls radiating heat that could melt asteroid belts from light years away. Entire civilizations had been reduced to glowing slag in a matter of hours. The Kethmori Military Council has voted, announced General Voxtar, his forearms gesturing dramatically as his translator converted his clicking speech into standard galactic. We cannot spare any more ships. Our home systems require protection. Similar declarations followed from the Nexari Trade Federation, the Crystalline Collective, and even the proud warrior clans of Drakmor. Each species that had once boasted of their military might now spoke only of retreat and defensive positions. The great alliance that had maintained peace for 3 centuries was crumbling in the face of an enemy they barely understood. Ambassador Zethkri stood slowly, his elongated frame casting a shadow across the circular assembly floor. "There is still one option we have not discussed," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. The conversations died instantly. "You cannot be serious," hissed Commander Silthi of the Serpent Worlds, her scaled head weaving back and forth in agitation. "The old treaties specifically forbid." "The old treaties were written for a different time," Zethkri interrupted, "when we faced conventional enemies, when our greatest fear was another trade war or border dispute." He gestured toward the massive holographic display that dominated the center of the chamber, showing the steady advance of red markers through their space. "This is not conventional warfare. This is extinction." The chamber erupted in arguments, dozens of voices mixing into an incomprehensible din. Some species had fought wars with humanity in the distant past. Others had simply heard the stories passed down through generations. All knew the legends. Humans had appeared on the galactic stage roughly 400 years ago, emerging from a small blue world in what had been considered an unremarkable system. Their technology was primitive by galactic standards, their ships crude and inefficient. What they lacked in sophistication, however, they made up for in sheer determination and an unsettling willingness to fight against impossible odds. The human-Valerian War had lasted barely 6 months, but it had become the stuff of legend across the galaxy. Outnumbered 1,000 to 1, the human fleet had somehow managed to not only survive but achieve a strategic victory that forced the mighty Valerian Empire to negotiate. The stories told in military academies spoke of human ships ramming dreadnoughts rather than surrendering, of soldiers who continued fighting even after suffering wounds that would kill most species. After the peace accords, humanity had been granted membership in the Galactic Council, but had largely kept to themselves. They maintained a small but well-equipped fleet and seemed content to focus on their own affairs. Most species were happy to let them remain in their corner of space, trading occasionally but otherwise avoiding contact. "The humans have been silent for over 2 centuries, argued Counselor Nimra of the Ethereal Communion. "We do not even know if their civilization still exists. Their last communication was a simple acknowledgement of the burning tide's emergence." Zethkri activated his personal communicator and transmitted a data packet to the central display. The hologram shifted to show a detailed analysis of human space. Unlike the panic and evacuation that characterized most of the galaxy, human systems showed steady, methodical activity. Ships moved in organized patterns. Construction continued on schedule. There were no signs of the chaos that gripped other civilizations. "They know," he said simply. "They have been preparing." The revelation sent a chill through the assembly. If the humans were preparing rather than fleeing, it suggested they believed they could fight. More disturbing was the implication that they had been preparing for some time, possibly since the first reports of the burning tide reached galactic intelligence networks. "Even if we could contact them," rumbled Chancellor Grokmai of the Stone Throne Empire, his massive frame shifting with obvious discomfort, "what makes you think they would help? We have not exactly been welcoming to them over the centuries." The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Every species in the chamber had at some point voted to restrict human expansion, limit their trade rights, or exclude them from important decisions. The official reasoning had always been about maintaining stability and preventing disruption to established order. The truth was simpler and more shameful. They were afraid of what humanity might become if given full access to galactic resources and technology. Because, Zethkri said quietly, stopping the burning tide is not just about saving our civilizations. It is about saving the galaxy itself. And humans, for all their peculiarities, have always shown a disturbing tendency to fight for lost causes. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was inevitable. As reports came in of 3 more systems falling to the burning tide, even the most reluctant voices began to waver. By the time the emergency session concluded, a narrow majority had voted to send a formal request for assistance to the human government. As the assembly dispersed, Zethkri remained behind, staring at the tactical display. The red markers representing the burning tide had advanced another 2 light-years during their discussions. At their current rate of expansion, they would reach the core worlds within 6 months. He wondered if the humans would even respond to their message. More importantly, he wondered if the legends were true. The stories painted humanity as a species of warriors and madmen, equally likely to charge headlong into certain death or devise impossible strategies that somehow worked against all logic. In 6 hours, their message would reach human space. In 12 hours, they might have an answer. The galaxy's fate now rested with a species they had spent centuries trying to keep at arm's length. Zethkri gathered his robes and walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the empty chamber. Behind him, the holographic display continued its silent count of burning worlds. The human response came faster than anyone had expected. Within 8 hours of the Galactic Council's transmission, every major communication array in the galaxy received the same message: coordinates for a meeting point in neutral space, along with a simple directive to send representatives authorized to make military decisions. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching as alien ships arrived at the designated coordinates. The meeting point was a dead system, its star having collapsed into a white dwarf millions of years ago. It was the perfect location for a conversation no one wanted overheard. 43 ships and counting, reported Lieutenant Commander Jackson from the sensor station. Everything from Valerian dreadnoughts to those crystal formations the collective calls warships. Chen nodded, her expression neutral despite the historical significance of the moment. This was the largest gathering of alien military assets humanity had encountered since the war with the Valerians. More importantly, it was the first time they had come asking for help. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "Bring us to the center of the formation." The Defiance moved forward, accompanied by 5 other human vessels. To alien observers, the human ships looked outdated, their angular designs lacking the elegant curves favored by most galactic civilizations. What the aliens could not see were the modifications hidden beneath conventional-looking hulls. Improvements developed during centuries of isolation and preparation. The meeting took place aboard the Valerian flagship, a massive vessel that served as neutral ground. Admiral Chen entered the conference chamber flanked by her tactical staff, noting how the various alien species had arranged themselves in loose groupings based on old alliances and territorial borders. Ambassador Zethkri stepped forward, his tall frame imposing even among the diverse assembly. "Admiral Chen, thank you for responding to our request. I am sure you are aware of the crisis facing the galaxy." "I am," Chen replied, taking a seat at the circular table. "The question is whether you understand what you are asking." The chamber fell silent. Several alien representatives exchanged glances, uncertain how to interpret her words. General Voxtar leaned forward, his forearms clicking against the table surface. "We are asking for military assistance against an enemy that threatens all life in the galaxy. Surely the implications are clear." Chen activated her personal display unit, projecting a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy into the center of the chamber. Red zones marked areas controlled by the burning tide, while blue indicated systems still under Allied control. The contrast was stark and sobering. "You are asking humanity to commit its forces to a war that every other military power in the galaxy has already lost," she said calmly. "You are asking us to stand against an enemy that has destroyed everything put in front of it. You are asking us to risk our species' survival for civilizations that have spent centuries treating us as dangerous outsiders. The accusations hung in the air like weapons. Commander Silthy's scales bristled with indignation. The Council has always maintained fair and equitable. The Council, Chen interrupted, has consistently voted to limit human expansion, restrict our access to advanced technologies, and exclude us from key strategic discussions. When we offered to share our defensive innovations after the Nexari crisis, we were told our methods were too aggressive for civilized warfare. Chancellor Grokmai shifted uncomfortably in his reinforced chair. Admiral, if you have come here simply to air grievances, I came here to ensure everyone understands the cost of what you are requesting, Chen said, her voice carrying the weight of command authority. Humanity will fight the burning tide, but not as auxiliaries or support forces, not under the command of the same military leaders who have led the galaxy to the brink of extinction. She stood and walked to the holographic display, manipulating the controls to show detailed tactical projections. If you want human assistance, you will accept human command of all allied forces. You will provide complete access to your technological databases and military resources. You will follow human strategic doctrine, even when it conflicts with your traditional methods of warfare. The demand sparked immediate protests from multiple representatives. The concept of placing their forces under human command was almost unthinkable to species that had viewed humanity as junior partners at best. This is unacceptable, declared Counselor Nimra, her ethereal form shimmering with agitation. Our forces cannot be subordinated to— Your forces, Chen said quietly, are losing. In 3 months, the burning tide will reach the Nexari home system. In 5 months, they will be at the Valerian capital. In 8 months, they will control half the galaxy. She turned to face the assembly directly. You can choose to fight under human command, or you can choose to die under your own. The brutal honesty of her statement silenced the chamber. Ambassador Zethkri studied the tactical projections, his analytical mind processing the implications. The human predictions were based on current enemy advancement rates and allied defensive capabilities. Barring a dramatic change in strategy or the introduction of new weapons technologies, the projections were horrifyingly accurate. What makes you believe human tactics will succeed where ours have failed? He asked. Chen smiled for the first time since entering the chamber, but it was not a pleasant expression. Because we have spent 400 years studying your military doctrines, learning from your defeats and preparing for threats you could not imagine. Because while you have been playing politics and maintaining comfortable distances from dangerous neighbors, we have been fighting. She manipulated the display again, showing classified records of human military operations, border skirmishes with pirate fleets, defensive actions against unknown raiders from the galactic rim, encounters with automated weapon systems left behind by extinct civilizations. For every major alien conflict the galaxy knew about, the records showed humans had been quietly fighting smaller but similar battles for decades. You ask what makes us different, Chen continued. We do not fight for territory or resources or political advantage. We fight for survival. We fight to protect what matters. And when we fight, we do not stop until the enemy is completely destroyed or we are. The psychological impact of her words was immediate and visible. Several alien representatives seemed to shrink back in their seats while others leaned forward with obvious interest. The reputation humanity had earned during the Valerian War was not based on propaganda or exaggeration. There is another factor you should consider, Admiral Chen said, returning to her seat. The burning tide is not just another enemy fleet. Our intelligence suggests they are not even a natural phenomenon. Someone or something created them as a weapon, which means this war will not end with a negotiated peace or territorial compromise. It ends with the complete victory of one side or the other. The implications of her words settled over the assembly like a heavy blanket. If humanity was correct, traditional diplomatic solutions would be meaningless. This was not a conflict that could be resolved through negotiation or strategic withdrawal. Ambassador Zethkri spoke first, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to say. The Valerian Empire accepts your terms. One by one, other representatives added their agreement. Some spoke reluctantly, others with growing conviction as they realized the alternative was extinction. By the end of the session, 41 of the 43 alien governments had placed their forces under human command. Admiral Chen stood and activated her communicator. All stations, this is Command Actual. Execute Protocol 7. Begin fleet deployment immediately. Across human space, ships that had been waiting in hidden bases and concealed shipyards began moving toward the front lines. The galaxy was about to discover what humanity had been building during centuries of careful isolation. The first joint fleet exercise took place in the Kepler system, a strategically insignificant cluster of rocky worlds that served as a perfect testing ground for the new alliance. Admiral Chen watched from the bridge of the Defiance as alien warships attempted to adapt to human tactical doctrine. Valerian formation is falling behind the designated approach vector, reported Lieutenant Commander Jackson. The Nexari escorts are maintaining position, but their energy signatures suggest they are running their reactors at dangerous levels trying to keep up. Chen nodded, unsurprised by the difficulties. Human ships had been designed with different priorities than their alien counterparts. Where most galactic navies emphasized firepower and defensive shields, human vessels focused on speed, maneuverability, and endurance. The philosophical differences ran deeper than mere engineering choices. Signal the Valerian commander, she ordered. Remind him that precision is less important than maintaining formation integrity. We are not here to win awards for navigation accuracy. The communication came through moments later. Ambassador Zethkri's voice tight with frustration. Admiral, our ships are not designed for these acceleration profiles. We are pushing our structural limits to maintain your required speeds. Then you are learning the first lesson of human warfare, Chen replied. Your ships, like your strategies, were designed for the galaxy as it was, not as it is becoming. The burning tide does not respect your engineering limitations. Through the main view screen, she could see the mixed fleet attempting to execute a complex maneuver that human forces would consider basic. Ships of different designs and capabilities struggling to work together, their crews unused to the aggressive tactics that had become second nature to humanity. The exercise was interrupted by an urgent transmission from Galactic Intelligence Networks. Captain Torres, Chen's intelligence officer, appeared on the secondary display with a grim expression. Admiral, we have confirmation from the Outer Rim Monitoring Station. The burning tide has accelerated their advance. They have just entered the Sigma Draconis system. The news sent a chill through the bridge crew. Sigma Draconis was home to the Kethmori research colonies, advanced scientific installations that had been developing new defensive technologies. More importantly, it was 3 systems closer to the galactic core than intelligence had predicted the enemy would reach for another month. Time to target the core worlds? Chen asked. At their new rate of advancement, 4 months. Maybe less if they continue to accelerate. Chen studied the tactical displays, her mind racing through strategic calculations. The joint fleet was nowhere near ready for full deployment. The alien crews needed weeks of additional training, and several key technologies still required integration between different ship designs. Signal all vessels, she commanded. Exercise terminated. All ships return to base and prepare for immediate combat deployment. The order caused immediate confusion among the alien forces. Commander Silthi's voice crackled over the communication system, her translator struggling with the rapid pace of her speech. Admiral, surely you cannot mean to engage the enemy with untrained formations. Our crews have barely begun to adapt to your tactical requirements. Commander, the enemy has changed the timeline, Chen replied. We adapt to new circumstances or we fail. There is no third option. As the mixed fleet began its journey back to the staging areas, Chen called a secure conference with her senior staff. The holographic displays in the briefing room showed detailed analyses of the burning tide's capabilities based on data gathered from their latest attacks. The enemy has demonstrated the ability to modify their strategic approach, reported Commander Sarah Walsh, the fleet's tactical specialist. This suggests either advanced artificial intelligence controlling their forces, or a command structure capable of rapid decision-making across vast distances. Chen studied the enemy movement patterns, noting subtle changes in their approach to each new system. They are learning from each engagement, adapting their methods to overcome different defensive strategies, which means, added Captain Torres, they have likely analyzed our own tactical doctrines based on historical data. They may be preparing specific countermeasures for human military methods. The implications were sobering. Humanity's strategic advantage had always been based on unpredictability and innovative thinking. If the enemy could anticipate their moves, the war would become a simple matter of resource attrition, a contest humanity could not win. We need to accelerate our own timeline, Chen decided. Begin immediate deployment of all available human forces. Signal the alien governments that we are moving to active combat status ahead of schedule. The next 24 hours were chaos. Human shipyards that had operated in secret for decades suddenly revealed themselves, launching vessels that incorporated technologies the galaxy had never seen. The UES Prometheus emerged from hidden construction bays built inside an asteroid field, its hull incorporating experimental armor that could regenerate damage in real time. The UES Fury launched from a facility disguised as a mining operation, its weapon systems based on principles that pushed the boundaries of known physics. Allied forces scrambled to keep pace with the sudden acceleration. Alien crews who had expected weeks of additional training found themselves being rushed through abbreviated courses on human tactical doctrine. Engineering teams worked around the clock to install compatibility systems that would allow different technologies to function together. Admiral Chen received hourly reports on the readiness status of the combined fleet. The numbers were not encouraging. Barely 60% of the alien forces had achieved basic integration with human command systems. Several species were reporting significant problems adapting their existing ships to human strategic requirements. The Crystalline Collective presented the most serious challenge. Their vessels operated on principles so fundamentally different from conventional technology that standard human systems could not interface with them at all. Their representative, a being of living crystal called Resonance of Deep Thought, communicated through harmonic frequencies that required special translation equipment. The harmonic frequencies necessary for our vessels to achieve combat effectiveness cannot be synchronized with your command protocols, the Crystalline explained during an emergency meeting. Our ships must operate independently or not at all. Chen considered the problem, knowing that losing the collective's unique capabilities would significantly weaken the alliance. Their ships could phase through normal matter, making them ideal for reconnaissance and surprise attacks. But independent operation would leave them vulnerable to isolation and defeat. Can your vessels receive and process human tactical data without direct integration? She asked. Yes, but response times would be significantly delayed. Our decision-making processes require consensus among multiple consciousness nodes. Then you will serve as our deep reconnaissance force, Chen decided. Your ships will scout enemy positions and provide intelligence while the main fleet engages. When opportunities for decisive action arise, you will receive direct authorization from Fleet Command. The solution was imperfect, but it preserved the collective's contribution while acknowledging their limitations. Similar compromises were reached with other species whose technologies could not be fully integrated into human systems. As the combined fleet assembled for deployment, Chen stood in her ready room reviewing the final operational orders. They were about to attempt something unprecedented in galactic history, a coordinated defense involving dozens of species, hundreds of ship designs and tactical doctrines that had never been tested together in actual combat. Her aide, Lieutenant Park, entered with the latest intelligence reports. Admiral, we have received confirmation that the Burning Tide has completed their conquest of Sigma Draconis. All scientific installations have been destroyed. No survivors detected. Chen absorbed the news without visible reaction, though she felt the weight of every life lost. The enemy was not just conquering territory. They were systematically eliminating the galaxy's technological and scientific capabilities. This was not war in any traditional sense. It was methodical extinction. Signal the fleet, she ordered. All ships prepare for immediate departure. We engage the enemy at the Altair system in 72 hours. The die was cast. Humanity would lead the galaxy's last desperate stand against an enemy that had never known defeat. The legends spoke of human determination and innovation, but legends would not be enough. They needed a miracle, or they needed to create one. The Altair system had been chosen as the battleground for humanity's first major engagement with the Burning Tide, for several strategic reasons. Its binary star configuration created unique gravitational fields that would limit enemy maneuverability, while the asteroid belt between the third and fourth planets provided cover for smaller vessels. Most importantly, it was far enough from populated systems that defeat would not immediately threaten civilian populations. Admiral Chen stood in the Defiance's command center, surrounded by displays showing the positions of over 300 Allied vessels spread across the system. The sight was both inspiring and terrifying. Never before had so many different species worked together under unified command. But never before had the stakes been so high. "Enemy fleet detected at the system's edge," announced Lieutenant Commander Jackson. "Preliminary count shows approximately 150 vessels. They are maintaining standard approach formation." Chen studied the tactical display, noting how the burning tide ships moved through space. Unlike the diverse Alliance fleet, the enemy vessels appeared to be nearly identical in design. Each ship glowed with internal fire, their hulls radiating heat that registered on sensors from millions of kilometers away. "Signal all battle groups," she ordered. "Execute formation Alpha 7. Crystalline collective vessels. Begin deep reconnaissance sweep." The Alliance fleet began moving into position with surprising coordination. Weeks of intensive training had paid off, even if the various species ships still struggled with some aspects of human tactical doctrine. The Valerian dreadnoughts formed the heavy battle line, their massive hulls bristling with energy weapons. Nexari fast attack craft took positions for hit-and-run strikes, while Kethmori support vessels prepared to provide electronic warfare coverage. The human ships distributed themselves throughout the formation, serving as command and coordination nodes. Each human vessel carried liaison officers from multiple species, ensuring that communications and tactical data could flow smoothly, despite the incredible diversity of technologies involved. "Crystalline reconnaissance reports incoming," announced the communications officer. The harmonic frequencies of the collective's report required several seconds to translate into standard galactic speech. "Enemy vessels are larger than anticipated. Significant energy readings suggest advanced shielding systems. No detectable biological signatures aboard any ship." The last piece of information confirmed what human intelligence had suspected. The burning tide was entirely automated, controlled by artificial intelligence systems of unknown origin. This explained their perfect coordination and apparent fearlessness, but it also suggested vulnerabilities that biological crews would not possess. "Range to enemy formation?" Chen asked. 8 million kilometers in closing. They are maintaining constant acceleration." Chen activated the fleet-wide communication system, her voice carrying to every ship in the Alliance force. "All vessels, this is Admiral Chen. In approximately 30 minutes, we will engage an enemy that has never been defeated. They have destroyed everything in their path because previous forces tried to fight them, using conventional tactics. Today we show them what happens when the galaxy fights back." She paused, allowing her words to be translated into dozens of languages and communication methods. "Remember your training. Trust your allies. Follow your orders. And when the enemy discovers that this galaxy is defended by more than they bargained for, make sure they remember why humanity never backs down from a fight." The enemy fleet approached with mechanical precision, their formation never wavering despite the complex gravitational fields generated by Altair's binary stars. As they closed within weapons range, the Alliance got its first clear look at the vessels that had terrorized the galaxy. Each ship was roughly cylindrical, its hull composed of what appeared to be living metal that pulsed with internal fire. Weapon ports opened and closed like breathing pores, while the vessel's surfaces rippled with energy patterns that defied conventional understanding of physics. Most disturbing were the ship's sizes. Intelligence reports had underestimated them significantly. The smallest enemy vessels were larger than most Allied heavy cruisers. "They are not slowing down," reported the tactical officer. "Enemy formation will reach optimal firing range in 90 seconds. Chen watched the approaching fleet, noting subtle details that previous observers had missed. The enemy ships did not move like conventional vessels under thrust. They flowed through space like liquid, adjusting their courses with impossible smoothness. Whatever technology powered them operated on principles that human science had never encountered. "All ships, prepare to engage," she commanded. "Fire when ready." The battle began with a coordinated barrage from the Alliance's heaviest weapons. Valerian plasma cannons, Nexari particle beams, and human kinetic projectiles struck the leading edge of the enemy formation simultaneously. For a moment, space blazed with energy as hundreds of weapons fired at once. When the light faded, the enemy ships continued their advance undamaged. Their hulls had absorbed the massive energy discharge without showing any sign of distress. Even the human kinetic rounds, traveling at significant fractions of light speed, had simply vanished upon contact with the enemy vessels. Shields? Asked Commander Walsh. No detectable shield emissions, Jackson replied, his voice tight with concern. The weapons simply stopped existing when they made contact. The enemy response was immediate and devastating. Streams of liquid fire erupted from the approaching ships, crossing the distance between fleets in seconds. The first target was a Kethmori heavy cruiser positioned on the Alliance's left flank. The enemy weapon struck the ship's hull and began spreading like molten metal, consuming the vessel's armor and internal systems with terrifying efficiency. The Kethmori vessel is gone, reported the tactical station. Total hull breach in less than 10 seconds. Chen watched in horror as more enemy weapons found their targets. Alliance ships that had survived decades of conflicts were being destroyed faster than their crews could respond. The conventional wisdom about space combat was proving worthless against an enemy that operated by entirely different rules. All ships, emergency maneuvers, she commanded. Do not allow the enemy weapons to maintain contact with your hulls. Execute evasive pattern Delta 9. The Alliance fleet scattered, abandoning formation integrity in favor of survival. Ships that had been training to fight as coordinated battle groups suddenly found themselves engaged in individual duels with enemy vessels that seemed immune to their weapons, but Admiral Chen had not committed the Galaxy's last hope to a conventional engagement. Hidden among the retreating Alliance vessels, human ships were deploying weapons that had never been tested in actual combat. The UES Prometheus fired its first experimental shot, a projectile that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, designed to bypass conventional defensive systems. The weapon struck an enemy vessel and passed through it as if the ship were not there. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the enemy ship began to flicker, its solid form becoming translucent before stabilizing again. The hull showed visible damage for the first time in the engagement. Target that ship with all available firepower, Chen ordered. Concentrate everything on the damaged vessel. The Alliance fleet responded immediately, focusing hundreds of weapons on the single enemy ship. This time the weapons found their mark. Energy beams and projectiles that had been useless against undamaged enemy vessels now carved through armor and internal systems. Within seconds, the enemy ship exploded in a burst of contained fire. The first victory sent a wave of hope through the Alliance fleet, but it also revealed the true scope of their challenge. One enemy ship had been destroyed at the cost of 7 Alliance vessels, and the enemy fleet showed no sign of concern about the loss. They continued their advance with mechanical determination, adapting their tactics to counter the new weapons that had proven effective. Admiral, reported the communications officer, we are receiving emergency signals from multiple ships. The Nixari Fast Attack Squadron is requesting immediate support. The Valerian battle line is reporting critical damage to 3 dreadnoughts. Chen studied the tactical display, analyzing the flow of battle with the cold calculation that had made her humanity's most successful military commander. The Alliance was losing, but they were learning. Each exchange of fire revealed new information about enemy capabilities and weaknesses. Signal all vessels, she said calmly. Phase 2 of the engagement begins now. Execute protocol firebreak. Across the Alliance fleet, human ships began transmitting new tactical data and weapon configurations. The real battle was about to begin. Protocol firebreak transformed the battle in ways that surprised even the human command staff. As Alliance ships received new tactical data and weapon modifications, the nature of the engagement shifted from desperate defense to calculated aggression. Admiral Chen watched from the Defiance as her strategy began to unfold across the battlefield. The key breakthrough had come from analyzing the dimensional weapon's effect on the enemy vessel. The Burning Tide's apparent invulnerability was not based on conventional shielding or armor. Instead, their ships existed in a state of quantum flux, shifting between dimensions to avoid damage. The experimental weapon had locked one vessel into normal spacetime, making it vulnerable to conventional attacks. Transmit the frequency modulation to all Alliance vessels, Chen ordered. Every ship with quantum resonance capabilities needs to target different enemy vessels. We need to anchor their entire fleet in our dimension. The response was immediate but chaotic. Ships across the Alliance began modifying their weapon systems based on human technical specifications. The process was complicated by the need to adapt quantum physics principles to technologies that had never been designed for such applications. Commander. Silthi's voice crackled over the communication system, her frustration evident even through the translation matrix. "Admiral, our weapon systems are not compatible with these modifications. We require at least 6 hours to recalibrate our primary batteries." "You have 6 minutes," Chen replied. "Use secondary systems if necessary. Improvise. The enemy will not wait for us to achieve technical perfection." Across the battlefield, the Alliance fleet began implementing desperate modifications. Valerian engineers rerouted power systems to create quantum resonance fields. Nexari technicians bypassed safety protocols to push their particle weapons beyond designed parameters. Even the Crystalline Collective attempted to harmonize their frequency-based weapons with human quantum specifications. The enemy fleet continued its advance, seemingly unaware that their fundamental advantage was being systematically eliminated. As more Alliance ships completed their modifications, coordinated salvos began targeting individual enemy vessels. The effect was dramatic when successful. Enemy ships suddenly became solid, their hulls vulnerable to the concentrated firepower of dozens of Alliance vessels. But success came at a terrible cost. The modified weapons drew enormous power from Alliance ships, forcing many vessels to choose between offensive capability and defensive systems. Several Kethmori cruisers lost life support while attempting to maintain quantum resonance fields. A Nexari fast attack craft suffered complete power failure after overloading its particle beam array. "Enemy formation is adapting," reported Lieutenant Commander Jackson. "They are spreading out to prevent coordinated targeting. Some vessels are beginning to exhibit different defensive patterns." Chen nodded grimly. The Burning Tide's artificial intelligence was learning from each engagement, developing countermeasures to Alliance tactics in real time. The window of opportunity created by the quantum anchor technique was already beginning to close. "Signal the Prometheus," she commanded. "Begin Phase 3 deployment." The UES Prometheus had been holding back from the main engagement, positioned behind the Alliance battle line like a reserve force waiting for orders. Now it began moving forward, its experimental systems powering up for the first time in actual combat conditions. The ship's hull began to glow with internal energy as exotic matter reactors came online. "What is the Prometheus doing?" asked Ambassador Zethkri, his voice transmitted from the Valerian flagship. "That vessel is moving directly into the enemy formation." "The Prometheus is carrying our most advanced prototype weapon," Chen explained. "If conventional tactics cannot defeat the Burning Tide, we will employ unconventional ones." The human ship accelerated past the Alliance battle line, its hull beginning to blur as experimental engines pushed it beyond normal spacetime limitations. Enemy vessels immediately focused their attention on the approaching threat, streams of liquid fire converging on the Prometheus from multiple directions. The enemy weapon struck the human ship and simply stopped, their energy absorbed by experimental shielding that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Prometheus continued its approach, seemingly immune to the attacks that had destroyed dozens of Alliance vessels. As the experimental ship reached the center of the enemy formation, it began broadcasting a signal on quantum frequencies that affected every nearby vessel. Enemy ships started flickering between dimensions rapidly, their quantum flux states becoming increasingly unstable. Some vessels began to phase partially out of normal space, leaving portions of their hulls visible while other sections disappeared entirely. "The enemy fleet is destabilizing," reported the tactical officer with barely contained excitement. "Multiple vessels are losing dimensional coherence." But the victory was temporary. Even as some enemy ships lost control of their quantum states, others began adapting to the new threat. The Burning Tide's collective intelligence was analyzing the Prometheus's effect and developing immunity to the quantum interference. Within minutes, several enemy vessels had stabilized their dimensional frequencies and were approaching the experimental human ship with renewed purpose. "The Prometheus is in danger," warned Commander Walsh. "Enemy vessels are converging on her position. They appear to have developed resistance to the quantum interference." Chen made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of the war.
"Signal the Prometheus."
"Execute Protocol Omega." The transmission reached the experimental ship just as enemy vessels began surrounding it. Captain Rodriguez, the Prometheus's commanding officer, acknowledged the order with simple professionalism that spoke volumes about human military culture. "Understood, Admiral. It has been an honor serving with the fleet." The Prometheus's exotic matter reactors went critical in a controlled cascade that had been designed as a last resort weapon. The explosion that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Reality itself seemed to tear open around the human ship, creating a dimensional rift that drew in everything within a 1,000,000-kilometer radius. Dozens of enemy vessels were pulled into the rift before it collapsed, their quantum-stabilized hulls providing no protection against the fundamental forces being unleashed. When the phenomenon ended, a significant portion of the burning tide fleet had simply vanished, leaving behind only distorted space-time that would require decades to return to normal. The sacrifice of the Prometheus and her crew had eliminated nearly half the enemy force, but the victory came at a cost that went beyond the loss of a single ship. The Alliance fleet had witnessed the price of defeating the burning tide. Weapons so dangerous they threatened the fabric of reality itself. "Enemy fleet is withdrawing," reported Jackson, his voice subdued by the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. "Remaining vessels are retreating to the system's edge." Chen studied the tactical display, noting how the surviving enemy ships moved with different patterns than before. The artificial intelligence controlling the burning tide was no longer advancing with mechanical confidence. It was learning caution, adapting its strategies to account for the Alliance's willingness to employ weapons that endangered the galaxy itself. "Signal all ships," she commanded. "Begin recovery operations for damaged vessels. Prepare casualty reports." The Battle of Altair had ended in humanity's first tactical victory against the burning tide, but the cost had been enormous. 43 Alliance ships had been destroyed or damaged beyond repair. Nearly 8,000 beings from dozens of species had died learning how to fight an enemy that seemed to violate the fundamental laws of physics. As the Alliance fleet regrouped and began the long journey back to their staging areas, Admiral Chen received a priority transmission from Galactic Command. The burning tide had not retreated in defeat. Instead, they had split their forces, launching simultaneous attacks on 3 different systems. The lesson of Altair had taught them that overwhelming single targets was less effective than dividing the Alliance's attention. The real war was just beginning, and humanity had revealed weapons that made them as dangerous to the galaxy as the enemy they fought. The legends spoke of human determination and innovation, but no legend had prepared the galaxy for the price of salvation. 3 months after the Battle of Altair, the war had evolved into something unrecognizable from conventional galactic conflict. The burning tide had adapted to Alliance tactics with frightening efficiency, while humanity had responded by deploying increasingly dangerous weapons that pushed the boundaries of acceptable warfare. Admiral Chen stood in the redesigned command center of the Defiance, surrounded by displays showing the current state of a galaxy at war. The enemy's decision to split their forces had initially seemed like a strategic error. Smaller burning tide fleets should have been easier to defeat than the concentrated armadas that had terrorized the Outer Rim. Instead, the distributed approach had revealed the artificial intelligence's true sophistication. Each smaller fleet learned from the experiences of others, sharing tactical data instantaneously across vast distances. Every Alliance victory taught the enemy something new about human capabilities. "Intelligence report from the Perseus sector," announced Captain Torres, her expression grim as she reviewed the latest data. "The burning tide fleet there has developed new defensive protocols. They are now operating in quantum flux groups, making it impossible to anchor more than a few ships at a time." Chen studied the tactical analysis, noting how enemy adaptation had neutralized humanity's primary advantage. The quantum anchor technique that had proved so effective at Altair was becoming less reliable with each engagement. The burning tide was literally evolving faster than the Alliance could develop new weapons. "What about the dimensional mines deployed in the Vega system?" she asked. "Partially effective," Torres replied. "The enemy lost 6 vessels, but they have begun using some kind of predictive algorithm to detect spatial anomalies. Our hidden weapons are becoming less hidden." The situation was deteriorating faster than even pessimistic projections had predicted. Human weapons technology was advancing at an unprecedented rate, but the burning tide's adaptive capabilities meant that each new innovation provided only temporary advantages. More troubling were the reports coming from Alliance civilian populations. Ambassador Zethkri had requested an urgent meeting to discuss what he termed growing concerns about human military methods. The meeting took place aboard the neutral station at Procyon, with representatives from every major galactic civilization in attendance. The atmosphere was tense as Chen entered the conference chamber. "Admiral," Zethkri began without preamble, "we need to discuss the weapons being deployed by human forces. The dimensional rift generators, the quantum cascade bombs, the reality distortion devices. These weapons pose risks that extend far beyond their intended targets." Chen had been expecting this conversation. The weapons humanity was developing to fight the burning tide were indeed dangerous, sometimes catastrophically so. The dimensional rift that had destroyed the Prometheus had left a permanent scar in spacetime. Several star systems now exhibited gravitational anomalies that would persist for millennia. "Every weapon in war poses risks," she replied calmly. "The question is whether the risks of using them are greater than the risks of not using them." Commander Silthy leaned forward, her scales bristling with agitation. "Admiral, the quantum cascade device deployed in the Rigel system has destabilized subspace throughout that entire sector. Commercial traffic cannot safely navigate those shipping lanes. The alternative," Chen said, "was allowing the burning tide to consume 3 inhabited worlds with a combined population of 8 billion beings." I believe the choice was clear. The debate that followed revealed the fundamental philosophical divide that had emerged during the war. Most galactic civilizations viewed warfare as a political tool, with specific objectives and acceptable limitations. Humanity had approached the conflict as an existential struggle, where any means necessary to achieve victory were justified. Chancellor Grokmai spoke for many when he said, "We asked for your help to save our civilizations, not to watch you transform into something as dangerous as the enemy we face." The accusation struck deeper than intended. Chen had been wrestling with similar concerns privately, watching as human military doctrine evolved toward increasingly extreme measures. The scientists and engineers working on new weapons spoke casually about tearing holes in reality and destabilizing fundamental forces. War was changing humanity in ways that might prove irreversible. "What would you have us do?" she asked the assembly. "Fight the burning tide with conventional weapons that have proven completely ineffective? Watch system after system fall while we debate the philosophical implications of survival? We would have you remember," Zethkri said quietly, "that victory achieved through methods that destroy everything we seek to protect is not victory at all." The meeting was interrupted by an emergency transmission from the front lines. The burning tide had launched a massive offensive against the core worlds, bypassing outer defensive lines through a coordinated series of dimensional jumps. 12 enemy fleets had appeared simultaneously around critical systems, including the Valerian capital and the Nexari homeworlds. "Estimated time until enemy forces reach inhabited planets?" Chen asked. 18 hours for the first wave," reported the communications officer. "Maybe 36 hours before the capital worlds are under direct attack." The Alliance faced its greatest crisis yet. The enemy had learned to anticipate human tactics and was now using similar strategies against them. Worse, the core worlds contained most of the galaxy's industrial capacity and scientific research facilities. Their loss would make continued resistance almost impossible. "Admiral," Zethkri said, his voice reflecting the desperation felt throughout the chamber. "What options do we have?" Chen studied the tactical displays, analyzing enemy positions and Alliance resources. The situation was nearly hopeless using conventional strategies. The burning tide had positioned their fleets to make coordinate defense impossible while ensuring that any extreme weapons used against them would also threaten the civilian populations they were supposedly protecting. "We have one option," she said finally. "Operation Pandora." The name sent a chill through the assembly. Operation Pandora was humanity's most classified military project, a weapon system so dangerous that its existence had been known only to a handful of senior officials. Even the basic principles behind it had been considered too risky to develop under normal circumstances. "Admiral," Commander Walsh said carefully, "Operation Pandora has never been tested under combat conditions. The theoretical models suggest risks that could affect the entire galaxy. The theoretical models also suggest it is the only weapon capable of destroying the Burning Tide's central coordination network," Chen replied. "Without their collective intelligence, the individual fleets become vulnerable to conventional tactics. The weapon in question was designed to create a cascade failure in the quantum field that connected all Burning Tide vessels. In theory, it would sever their ability to share information and coordinate attacks. In practice, The quantum cascade could potentially destabilize the fabric of spacetime throughout the local group of galaxies. You are talking about a weapon that could end galactic civilization, Zethkri said, his voice barely above a whisper. I am talking about a weapon that could save it, Chen corrected. The burning tide will not stop until every world is consumed. They will not negotiate, they will not retreat, and they cannot be reasoned with. We can gamble on a weapon that might destroy everything, or we can watch everything be destroyed with certainty. The choice facing the galaxy was impossible. Risk total annihilation in an attempt to achieve victory, or accept gradual extinction through conventional defeat. As reports continued to arrive showing enemy fleets approaching the core worlds, the weight of that decision settled over every being in the chamber. Ambassador Zethkri stood slowly, his tall frame casting shadows across the conference table. If we authorize Operation Pandora, and if the weapon functions as designed, what guarantee do we have that humanity will not become the new threat to galactic security? The question hung in the air like a weapon itself. Chen met the ambassador's gaze directly, knowing that her answer would determine the fate of everything they were fighting to protect. You have my word, she said simply, and the word of every human who has died fighting for a galaxy that has never trusted us. The vote was close, but Operation Pandora was authorized. Humanity would deploy its most dangerous weapon in a desperate gamble to save a galaxy that might not survive the salvation. The deployment of Operation Pandora required every remaining human asset in the galaxy. Admiral Chen stood aboard the UES Absolute Zero, humanity's newest and most advanced vessel, watching as the final preparations for the most dangerous military operation in galactic history reached completion. Around her, the last great fleet humanity could muster prepared to strike at the heart of the burning tide's collective intelligence. The enemy's coordination network had been located through months of careful analysis and sacrifice. Deep within the Sagittarius arm, protected by the largest concentration of burning tide vessels ever observed, lay the source of their unified command. Intelligence suggested it was not a ship or station in any conventional sense, but rather a quantum phenomenon that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Final system checks completed, reported Chief Engineer Martinez. The Pandora device is operating within acceptable parameters. All quantum field generators are synchronized and ready for deployment. Chen nodded, though she felt none of the confidence her crew needed to see. The weapon they were about to deploy had been designed by humanity's brightest minds, working under impossible pressure. Computer simulations suggested it would work, but the same simulations carried warnings about potential consequences that kept military strategists awake at night. Fleet status report, she requested. All vessels ready for final approach, came the response from Captain Torres. The Valerian battle group has taken position on our starboard flank. Nexari fast attack squadrons are in position for the diversionary assault. Crystalline collective vessels report ready for deep reconnaissance. The Alliance fleet assembling for Operation Pandora represented the greatest military force in recorded galactic history. Every surviving ship, every trained crew, every operational weapon system had been committed to this single desperate gamble. If they failed, there would be no second chance. Ambassador Zethkri's voice reached her through the secure communication channel. Admiral, our sensors are detecting massive enemy fleet movements throughout the target sector. The burning tide appears to be concentrating their forces to defend their coordination center. Expected and anticipated, Chen replied. Signal all vessels. We begin final approach in 30 minutes. As the Allied fleet moved toward its target, reports began arriving from across the galaxy. The burning tide's simultaneous assault on the core worlds was proceeding with mechanical efficiency. 3 major industrial centers had already fallen, their populations either evacuated or consumed by the spreading fires that marked enemy occupation. Time was running out for billions of beings. The first contact with enemy forces came when the fleet was still 2 light hours from their target. Burning tide vessels emerged from quantum flux states throughout the system, appearing in formations designed to channel the Alliance into predetermined killing zones. The enemy had learned from every previous engagement, and their defensive preparations showed sophisticated understanding of human tactical doctrine. Enemy fleet composition is unlike anything we have encountered, reported the tactical officer. Estimated count exceeds 2,000 vessels. Many appear to be new designs we have never seen before. Chen studied the enemy formations, noting details that confirmed her worst fears. The Burning Tide had not been merely defending territory during their galactic conquest. They had been building, growing, evolving their capabilities at an exponential rate. The fleet defending their coordination center was larger and more advanced than anything they had deployed in previous battles. All vessels, engage at maximum range, she commanded. Do not allow enemy forces to close within their optimal firing distance. The battle began with a coordinated barrage from the Alliance's longest-range weapons. Valerian plasma cannons, human kinetic projectiles, and Nixari particle beams reached across millions of kilometers to strike at the approaching enemy. The results were better than previous engagements, but still sobering. Modified Alliance weapons could damage Burning Tide vessels, but destroying them required sustained firepower that left attacking ships vulnerable to counterattack. The enemy response was immediate and overwhelming. Streams of liquid fire crossed the distance between fleets, but the Burning Tide had developed new weapons as well. Some Alliance ships found themselves caught in energy fields that began converting their hull materials into more liquid fire. Others were struck by projectiles that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, passing through conventional shields as if they were not there. The Valerian flagship is reporting critical damage, announced the communications officer. Ambassador Zethkri's ship has lost primary power and is drifting out of formation. Chen watched as the battle developed according to enemy plans. The Burning Tide was using their numerical superiority to gradually overwhelm Alliance defenses, trading losses for strategic position. Unless something changed dramatically, the Allied fleet would be destroyed long before reaching the target area. Signal the fleet, she commanded. Execute Emergency Protocol 7. All ships prepare for dimensional jump. The order triggered a maneuver that had never been attempted with such a large and diverse force. Alliance vessels throughout the battle zone simultaneously activated quantum field generators, attempting to jump past enemy defensive lines directly to the target coordinates. The technique was dangerous under the best circumstances, and the stress of combat made catastrophic failure almost inevitable. Nearly a quarter of the Alliance fleet was lost during the jump. Ships materialized inside asteroids, emerged in overlapping space with other vessels, or simply vanished into quantum flux states they could not escape. But the survivors found themselves exactly where they needed to be, within striking distance of the Burning Tide's coordination center. The target was unlike anything in the Alliance's experience. Rather than a conventional structure, the enemy's central intelligence appeared as a sphere of twisted spacetime surrounded by rings of pure energy. Reality itself seemed to bend around the phenomenon, creating visual distortions that hurt to observe directly. Pandora device is locked onto target, reported Chief Engineer Martinez. All quantum field generators are synchronized and ready for activation. Chen hesitated for a moment, knowing that her next order would either save the galaxy or destroy it. The weapon they were about to deploy would create a quantum cascade, designed to sever every Burning Tide vessel from their collective intelligence network. Computer models suggested the cascade would be contained within the target system, but quantum mechanics had a tendency to produce unexpected results. All ships, clear the target area, she commanded. Activate the Pandora device. The weapon that humanity had built to fight an impossible enemy began its deadly work. Quantum field generators throughout the surviving Alliance fleet synchronized their outputs, creating a resonance pattern that targeted the specific frequency holding the Burning Tide's network together. The effect was immediate and visible. The sphere of twisted spacetime began to fluctuate, its energy rings pulsing with increasing instability. Throughout the galaxy, Burning Tide fleets suddenly stopped their coordinated attacks. Individual ships began operating independently, their perfect formation flying dissolving into chaos as the central intelligence controlling them flickered in and out of existence. The quantum cascade was working exactly as designed, but success came with a price that no one had fully anticipated. The destruction of the Burning Tide's coordination center created a quantum shockwave that propagated through subspace at faster-than-light speeds. Star systems throughout the galaxy experienced gravitational anomalies as spacetime itself rippled from the weapon's effects. "Admiral," reported the science officer, his voice tight with concern, "we are detecting massive subspace disturbances spreading from the target area. The quantum cascade is not containing itself as the models predicted." Chen watched in growing horror as sensor data showed the scope of what they had unleashed. The Pandora device had not simply severed the burning tide's network connections. It had torn a hole in the fundamental structure of reality itself, and that hole was expanding. "Can the cascade be stopped?" she asked. "Unknown," came the reply. "The quantum field interactions are beyond our current understanding. We may have created a self-sustaining reaction." Across the galaxy, the immediate threat of the burning tide was ending, as their fleets lost coordination and began destroying each other in confusion. But a new threat was emerging. Quantum storms that could destabilize entire star systems, gravitational anomalies that threatened shipping routes, and reality distortions that made some regions of space uninhabitable. Ambassador Zethkri's voice reached her through the chaos of emergency transmissions flooding the communication channels. "Admiral, what have we done?" Chen stared at the expanding quantum disturbance, knowing that she had made a choice between certain destruction and possible survival. The burning tide was defeated, but the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had saved galactic civilization by fundamentally altering the nature of reality itself. "We did what we had to do," she replied quietly. "We survived." The legends would remember this day as humanity's greatest victory, the moment when human determination and ingenuity saved the galaxy from extinction. But the legends would also remember the price of that salvation. A galaxy forever changed by weapons so powerful they challenged the fundamental laws of physics. As rescue operations began and the surviving Alliance fleet started the long journey home, Admiral Chen knew that the real work was just beginning. They had defeated one impossible enemy, but they had also created new challenges that would require the same courage and innovation that had made victory possible. The galaxy was safe, but it would never again be the same. And somewhere in the quantum storm spreading through space, the echoes of humanity's desperate gamble would continue to reshape reality for generations to come.